Hello, and welcome to All the Grief, a regular podcast for all those who have been touched by grief. We are your hosts. I am Rebecca Luttrell.
And I am Andrea Mathern. We are two friends, a therapist, and a social scientist, both highly sensitive fellow grievers, here to share our hearts as we talk about all the grief. Good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning, Andrea.
How is your heart this morning?
My heart is feeling pretty joyful. Usually every year around Academy or Oscar time, I do the podcast with my brother and cousin. And so the list for nominees came out this morning, and I was delighted to see Sinners not only on the list, but also that they got a record-breaking 16 nominations. So
Makes
so
my heart
sweet.
so happy.
It's so good. And it's just such a good movie. I knew you'd be happy. And then to see that Andrea's film, Come See Me in the Good Light, was nominated for a documentary, which I already knew the challenges around being nominated for a documentary because usually it's a first-time documentarian. So this wasn't their first documentary, the people who produced it, and it has to show in theaters for a certain amount of time. And so there were just a lot of challenges that were kind of like, oh, we probably won't be at the Oscars, and now they are. So my heart's just really joyful, and I might get to babysit puppies again when Meg goes to the award show. So yeah, it just made me really happy. There are good things happening in the world right now, and it's good to remember that.
I love it. I had not heard about the nominations, but literally as I was coming up to record, a friend texted me, I just heard about the nomination. I knew it was about Andrea's. So it makes me very happy for everyone. Also, I'm thrilled about Sinners. You're right. I have been in an anger with Hollywood around the few number of awards that Sinners has won in this award season. So I hope this 16 means something momentous is about to happen.
Yeah. And how is your heart this morning?
My heart this morning, right now, it feels really activated. One of my littles got sick last night, and that's just not fun for anyone. And he's so sweet. He's such a big feeler in the way that I am. I really trust and understand his intuition, and they have their nature school today. So it's like their favorite day of the week. And last night, as I'm putting him to bed, he said, this might mean I can't go to nature school tomorrow, as if he's like prepping me for the news. That was really sweet. And I said, yeah, I'm glad you know that that's a possibility. And he said, yeah, even though I really want to, it just might not be the best idea. Yeah, we'll check in the morning. And this morning he said, I really want to go, and I don't think it's the best idea. And it's just so sweet. I'm like, oh, I love you so much. So, there's just like the buzzing around of kind of making sure he's comfortable. His brother, who doesn't want to go without him, though he had the choice, just trying to get them all set up and settled for a day in so they can heal. I feel a lot of sort of active love in my heart.
Yeah, beautiful. Cute.
Well, this morning we're going to talk to another mother who probably understands those sudden sick days. Becky Faye Smith Galli is an author and columnist who writes about love, loss, and healing. A Moorhead Kane Scholar at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, not our first North Carolinian on the show. She was formerly employed by IBM, where she was a recipient of the Golden Circle Award for Marketing Excellence. In 2000, the Baltimore Sun published her first column, a piece about playing soccer with her son, from her wheelchair. With over 400 columns, she then launched Thoughtful Thursdays, Lessons from a Resilient Heart, a weekly column that shares what's inspired her to stay positive. In 2017, she published her first book, Rethinking Possible, a memoir of resilience. And in 2024, she published her latest book, Morning Fuel, Daily Aspirations to Stretch Your Mind Before Starting Your Day. Becky resides in Lutherville, Maryland, outside of Baltimore. Welcome to All the Grief, Becky.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we're so excited. Becky, how is your heart this morning?
That's a good question. I think probably at the moment it's a little bit tender. I just came through a recent hospitalization that was unexpected. And it's always one of those things when you're in it, and you're just doing the next thing. And then when you get home, there's this recovery bubble of where you're trying to figure out what exactly happened and can I prevent it again? And then being grateful for everyone who was there for you, and at the same time trying to discern what's the next thing to. So that always puts my heart in a little bit of a tender mode because you look back and think how it could have been really bad. But I had a whole support team, which is what my life is all about, is about finding people that can help you get through whatever's next.
Oh
So
my goodness. Well, we're glad to see you on this side and hold, yeah, that getting out of the hospital is oftentimes not the end of sort of the recovery emotionally and physically. So welcome home, and we hope that your transition is easeful. Grief can be this experience that shifts us from a before and after, turns our world upside down, or we can remember my life was going one way and then we took a hard left or we hit a wall. So when you think about your grief origin story, and you have many griefs that you've shared through your writing, what comes to mind as your grief origin story?
I think it has to be the death of my 17-year-old brother.
Yeah.
I was 20 at the time, and we were a very closely knit family of five. My dad was in the public arena. My mom, stay-at-home mom. I was the oldest. My brother was the son. My sister was the youngest. We each had defined roles in the family. And he was that kid, you know. He was a student government leader in the high school and regionally. He was a musician. He was an athlete. He just had it all together, had great plans to go to Wake Forest University, become a
Mm.
lawyer, get into politics, the whole thing, and he could have done it. There was just no question about that. But he was water skiing and turned to look and wave to some folks at the shoreline and hit the end of a pier and was in a coma for 9 days. And
Oh.
so it was a very hard pivot in our lives where we went from this closely knit configuration of five to this configuration of four. And it took us a really long time to move through that grief.
Oh my goodness, my heart is so tender, Becky. You can feel even in telling the story so many years later, the jarring realization of what happened, the surprise of a moment, one moment to the next, of water skiing and friendly waving to an accident that took his life. Oh, Becky, how tender. So some of the things that you were navigating after that were your own surprising grief of losing your brother and your role as big sister to the brother. We've talked to several other people who have lost siblings and the unique grief that comes with sibling loss because I read recently some quote, siblings are the ones who are with us for the whole ride. Our partners we meet, halfway through life or a third through life or later. Our parents, if it's a death in time, they die before we do. And our siblings are the ones that are meant to be so often with us for the whole ride. So to lose him so unexpectedly and so young must have really shaken you personally. But then, as you said, as a family, how did you come through that so young? 20 is not yet at a place where you're a resource to navigate that necessarily.
It's interesting in writing the first book, Rethinking Possible, when I look back physically where we were and then emotionally where we were, I could see that we shattered. I can see we really shattered, and we each took different paths to grief, which was a lesson that I brought with me in the subsequent griefs, is being really patient with myself as I navigate my own way through things. But my dad was a minister. He could be very public with his grief. He was able to speak about it right away and the depths of what he felt and even the lessons that he was learning along the way. He soon became a noted lecturer on grief. He could do that. My mother was very private. She joined support groups and became a leader in some of parents who had lost children. I was away junior in college, and my girlfriends really helped move me through grief in a way I could not have by myself. They kept me going to classes, kept me engaged in campus life. They knew Forrest, my brother, but they weren't a part of his community. So they could empathize and sympathize, but at the same time, they loved me in a way that kept me moving. My sister, however, was 17 months apart with my brother, and were tag team in high school. And so that was a community loss there. Not only her grief, but everyone there was sad. And, she wanted to be with him.
Mm.
Parents saw that and got her support and help so that she could get through that in a healthy way. So we physically shattered too, because my parents were in Hickory, North Carolina, which was 3 hours away from where I was. And at the same time, my dad got a new job in Huntington, West Virginia. So he moved away. So we were in, two different states, at least 3 to 8 hours apart. And so we had logistics to deal with as well. But through it all, we kept talking and we kept communicating in ways that we felt was helpful. And I think that's another lesson that I've learned going through it is your life changes, but you can still maintain relationships. They may just be very different than what they were before.
Yeah, absolutely. The way that you've named that piece, everyone does navigate grief differently. And so when you are a close knit family and you go through what isn't just a grief loss, but it's a trauma, it's an out of order death. It's not supposed to happen. And Andrea's pointing out this moment of sort of like joy, happiness, something, he's waving, everything's fine. And then life completely changing in an instant, that does become really hard, I think, for people to stay connected. Divorce is really common in child loss because people are not feeling met in their grief and held in that by the other partner. And so much of it is what you're naming. How do we stay in communication? Yes, we're navigating different arenas of how we're holding our grief, who he was to us, how we're moving that relationship forward, but how do we maintain that connection? And so I hear you naming that was helpful. It feels like maybe even a foundation for some of your subsequent griefs, which feel really challenging. And that knowledge, I did read it in your book, the piece around who are the people you go to. And that feels really important. So how many years was it before the next grief entered your life? Because sometimes they're kind of back to back and sometimes we get a little bit of breathing room. But would you name the divorce as the next one?
No, because I was happily married. I had my first child was born healthy. It was my second child, Matthew, who was born with seizures. And so that put me into another tailspin of what in the world is happening. It was an undiagnosed disease with no cause, no cure, very much like a lot of the other things that I've experienced in life. The transverse myelitis that paralyzed me was no cause, no cure. Autism that affected my second child, my second daughter, third child, no cause, no cure with that. So there's another element that's added when there isn't a specific reason for something happening. And that puts you into this realm of dealing with uncertainty. And what does that mean? And where do you put that in your mind so it doesn't torment you? So some of the lessons that I learned with Forrest, you have to be very honest with your feelings. You have to be and there's a lot of anger that happens around grief. And my dad was one that was very open about that. He really gave us permission to be angry that we lost our brother. And the other thing is you're angry, you're sad, you're trying to figure out how to manage all these feelings, and then you have to look around and be honest with your feelings, honest with your resources. Who can help you manage through that? And they got resources for my sister, but it isn't always the same people. For example, later on, when Rachel and we lost our dad, we couldn't be each other's support system in that situation because we were too close to it. We were both in our own grief, and our memories just made us go, it was worse. And so finally, we had to say to each other very honestly, I love you. But our conversations when we talk about dad really aren't helping us move through this grief. And so we reached out, and I encourage people to reach out to people that aren't directly affected, that can be more of a support and a sustenance for you than someone that will in some ways pull you down. So be honest with how you feel, what your resources are, get the right resources. I'll say in the boat with you who can help you do this. And it's not always the same people. You have to rotate them out. And if one person's helpful in one situation and not in another, I don't uninvite them, but I just don't reach out to them as frequently as I might in the future because everybody has their strengths and you don't really know what you need until you're in it. And we often talk about reading the room. It's in the room. Well, sometimes you have to read your heart. You know, like, what does my heart need? And it's so wonderful that you all talk about that so openly, to be in touch with that so much, because in my opinion, talk about the resilient heart. That's what we need to keep full. And we get a choice about what we put in that heart a lot of times. And if it's deplenished, find the resources that are uplifting.
It seems like as you're telling this story, so much of what your dad gifted you, it's rare for us to sit in space with people who are like, anyone, any adult in my life said, you get to be mad. And so, like, letting you have whatever emotion you're having and not jumping to you've got this, you can be resilient. And it's sort of like, no, you get to feel how you feel in it. And I think that that's what stood out to me, even as I was going through the book, The Morning Fuel, which is lovely. But that sense of there's something really grounded. And I always need somebody to be really grounded in letting me feel my grief before they're giving me the resource to kind of work with it or be out of it. Because if you're afraid of my grief and you're afraid of my feelings and you just want to say, it's okay, these things happen, I can't do it. I have to be able to be mad, sad, confused, lost. And so it does feel like there was this foundation laid in that relationship to your dad, for what your resilience was later in your life. And kind of, I mean, I don't know if I'm overstating it, but to say that probably was part of his legacy to you.
Oh, for sure. The honesty is something that he showed us. He lived it. Um, but it's just used to say we're all just one ball of emotions. You just need to be aware of them and express them in a healthy way and to keep moving it. The danger is getting stuck in things that you don't name, to not know that you're mad, you're angry. And there's a section in the book where I am crying at my brother's funeral, but I'm also kind of angry at him for not looking where he was going,
Sure.
and be very honest about that. And I understand it, but that doesn't make me not be angry about it. And so you can feel it and it not own you. So I say, feel it. And that's where the whole writing thing about journaling, that was one of the things I talked to Dad about. I have these spinning thoughts. What do I do with them? He said, write them down. It'll be a way to get them out. And then you'll see some patterns. And it's like if you can at least express it in a healthy way, it is out of your head and on something that's tangible. And the practice I continue today.
That's beautiful. I love it. I think we received your book at the perfect moment. At least for me, I am not a journaler. The first day I opened it was to one about wasting time, which also probably makes Rebecca laugh because I'm like, I can cook and listen to an audiobook and sweep with my feet all at the same time. How many things can I do at once so I don't waste time? So it was so beautiful to open up to that. So I've loved the invitation of that journaling as a way to sort of just pause. And I think to what Rebecca was sort of alluding to, the prompts in it and the stories in it are not like they all have to feel good. It's like, how does this land for you? What does this reflection mean to you when you think about it? And I think I just am hearing your dad opening up that space for you all to explore the human experience, not to tell you what the human experience is. And that's a lovely gift. I also just want to underline what you said about listening to our heart and that it's understanding what we need. And even it can be so complex in grief because people are like, what do you need? Just let me know if you need anything. You're like, I need someone to come brush my teeth because I don't even have the energy to brush my teeth. You can't even think of it, but you do know what feels good. You can at least know that this person in my presence feels good. That helps me. And I can't tell you more than that. Can you stop by? So I just love that invitation that it's okay to have certain people that can really be present in your grief and that others can't. And that isn't, you're gone from my life forever. It's just maybe down the road, you'll be the right person to sit next to me as I walk through this.
Yeah, that was relatable too when you were talking about that, because I remember that in my divorce where I also felt like it was nice to have different people so that I wasn't exhausting. One person was on my mind as a caretaker. So I have 5 people I can call and I can kind of rotate through them to support me as I'm just in this really intense grief of something that sort of was not expected, because my divorce was the 2000 something version of he left for cigarettes and he never came home. And it was just like, what happened? And so feeling that loss so acutely for an extended period of time and only being able to have resources myself so much before I needed to have a person be there for me. So I love that invitation of having multiple people so that all of it doesn't fall on one. It's like, I just need to talk to you for 20 minutes and then I'm going to settle again. And then I'll call you tomorrow maybe, but I'm going to call some other people first and just, because it would come in waves and it would be really intense in a way that I needed support. And I always felt so conscious. I don't want someone to start dreading my phone call because it was very one-sided, needing the support. Like, I don't care what's happening in your life. I can't breathe. Like, help me. It was a challenging time. And I think you pointed to something else that I wanted to highlight, which is the sense of certainty and with uncertainty and really having to come to terms with that. And I think certain losses and certain experiences make that more obvious. I do think it is a reality we live in that we are not guaranteed anything, and that a lot of people don't necessarily know that because it's kind of seems predictable. I wake up and my people are here and this is what we do every day and we have routine and we have all of this. And I remember reading a book on parenting where they talked about letting your child cry tears of futility over things that just can't be different. And so it could be, my stuffed animal got destroyed and I want a new stuffed animal. I'm so sad because I loved it so much, and just letting them cry. I know you love that stuffed animal and now it's not the same, because when they feel those tears of futility can move through, it does build resilience, which feels like what you're talking about, this place of uncertainty and having to find a way towards acceptance. This happened and I don't know why. I don't know that I can prevent something like this in the future, and being with that. And I wonder to what extent that experience for you actually really inspired, I need to write about this so that there's a voice around the things when you don't have answers.
The writing piece came a bit later, but I will share an exercise a therapist gave me to do with Brittany, my oldest, when her younger sibling presented with seizures, which was to get in touch with her feelings. We did what we called happy, sad, mixed up, mad. And before we went to bed, we were supposed to talk about a happy thing, a sad thing, a mixed up thing, which was there's one way to look at it, could be happy, another could be sad, and then mad. And the mixed up thing was the key because we could look at the rain and it would be awesome because it hadn't rained in forever and we wanted our flowers to grow. But it also rained out her softball game, which was a negative. So it gave us this opening to talk about our feelings and how some things can be looked at two different ways when it's unclear. And that really created a good relationship, started a baseline for me. So Brittany must have been 4, like 3 or 4, just a vocabulary around mixed up things, how you could look at things two different ways, because she had started thinking that all boy babies had seizures. And when she was playing with her girlfriends, that she would say, we can have babies, but not boy babies because they have seizures. And so that was magical thinking. So the therapist told me. And so we put some strategies into place to try to get a good conversation around those feelings that were really mixed up. But you also bring up another point when you're speaking to other folks about what's going on in your life. And some people just want to make it better. They just want to just like scoot over and make it better. And it's almost to the point, well, these things do happen. And, and they kind of skip over the emotion. And it's like their denial of your pain makes your pain worse because you feel like you have to justify it. And I never really thought of it that way. There's a quote in one of my morning fuel books. I forget who said it, but denial can be a useful thing to get you through a tough time, but not when somebody else is telling you to deny it when they're supposed to be helping you. Admit that, yeah, that's terrible. Whatever you're going through is terrible. And to move through it, but not to say, oh, you'll be fine, or everybody goes through those things. So it's made me be a more thoughtful listener as I'm trying to engage with whoever's telling me a story and to really acknowledge whatever pain they're experiencing. I might think it's unreasonable, but if the person's in pain, I need to be reverent of that, respectful of that.
It's such a beautiful reminder to ourselves as the recipient of the fixer and to ourselves when we want to go into fixing mode, just ensuring that we're just letting people have the experience that they need to have and we can just witness. So this would be a full episode just talking about the grief of your brother and how your family unit sort of moved through that and probably still to this day does. But it wasn't the end of your grief story. You had a son born with epilepsy, and then a daughter born with autism. And then you got a divorce. And before the ink's dry, you are hit with a life-changing illness. So, I mean, we could go anywhere from here, but I'm curious as you think about the way these griefs were both related and not related to each other, where does your mind go as you think back through all of these things?
It's a little overwhelming, but it seems like through every stage, I got what I needed to get through it. Marriage, 2 special needs kids are a lot for any marriage. And actually, my fourth-born son had a rare blood disorder, but he miraculously got through that. So that was great. So it was 9 days after the divorce was final that I went to bed. I'd had the flu that became a mycoplasma pneumonia and was on some medication to address that, and woke up with shooting pains in my legs, went down the steps, paid the mortgage, went back up the steps, got in bed, and this horrific pain made its way up my spine, and in 6 hours I was paralyzed from the waist down. So a third of people recover fully, a third recover partially, a third have no recovery at all. So I was very hopeful there for a good 19 months that I was going to walk again. But in that 19 months, this is when I started journaling, and a friend from high school reached out to me. This is 1997 when email was just becoming popular, way before social media or any of that. And my friend Scott emailed me and said, Becky, is that you? And I thought, what a great question. Who am I now? And am I going to be paralyzed or not? And so he was a rapid typist, and we went back and forth. I updated him on my marriage, my kids, my divorce, my paralysis. And as a result of those writings, I started telling stories about what it's like to parent 4 kids from a wheelchair, and I had wonderful support from my ex-husband. He was there for me every step of the way, there for the kids every step of the way. So I began to write these stories, and someone in my church said, maybe you should publish this in the Baltimore Sun. And someone had been a previous editor there, took a look at it. And so I wrote 6 or 8 columns for the Baltimore Sun, and that became part of a monthly column at a local weekly. And so I did that for 12 years. And I think somebody said, you really should probably try to write a book. And so I wrote Rethinking Possible. And then people started saying, how do you get through your days? And I said, well, I usually start them with a little morning fuel, and that's my daily reader. And so I wrote what I read, and was the genesis of that book. So I've kind of kept pace with whatever life has thrown my way, with support and encouragement for others. And I was raised in a family of faith, and that's a big part of who I am and kind of the engine of how I get through a lot of tough times. But it's with a lot of support and care and love from people in my world. And so I love writing my Thoughtful Thursdays, and I put it out on social media and my email list. And I try to share, what is it? I believe life can be good no matter what. And I've had a lot of what. But I try to share what's helped me stay positive that week. I may tell you something that's got me a little angry or upset, but I usually end in a positive way, because I choose to look at life positively. And I sometimes have to look harder for it than at other times, but it's always worth the effort.
Becky, to help us just put ourselves in the chronology of your life. So you have 4 kiddos. What were the ages of your kiddos when you divorced?
3, 4, 6, and 9.
Okay. That is still a lot happening in that range of kids' needs. And we have had a guest on who has a special needs son, and she talked to us briefly about the divorce rate between couples who parent special needs kiddos. I mean, it's just those of us who have parented have been through the newborn years, just the way everything changes, and it's very intense. But then to put on top of that the unknown, I heard you saying, no cause, no cure, which is its own type of grief for these illnesses. Not to say anything's better or worse, but when we have a cause that we can point to, even, in death or in a diagnosis, we can understand, okay, this is why this is happening. But when it feels just completely out of nowhere, that's its own type of grief. So you're coming through all of that with such young kiddos, and then this hits you. I just feel like it deserves a little breath. That is a huge just thing on top of thing to have experienced. And I'm so glad to hear that you and your ex-husband found ways to move through that in support of one another and centered on these 4 kids.
Yes, and we still are good friends. We do some holidays together, and we enjoy each other's company. He's remarried, has a child, and I decided early on it was in my children's best interest for me to have a good relationship with their father. And I still like the man, So I'm doing what I can. Not everybody has that kind of situation, and I understand that. But for me, it works. And I felt like it was the right thing to do to try to preserve that. Like I said, not everyone can.
Yeah.
Um, I did lose my child Matthew who had autism at age 15. So
Mm.
his undiagnosed disease got worse, and so I lost him. And this is another one of those crazy ones. I lost him in the morning, and 6 hours later, my mother died
Oh,
on the same day. And
Wow.
as Rachel was going to West Virginia for my mom, I said, "Can you believe these happen on the same day?" And Rachel says, "Well, Sissy, you know what? It was just mom's time to take care of him."
mm,
Mm.
And somehow that just brought me great peace
yeah.
to think
Mhm.
that they both were in such a place where they could be cared for and be loved by one another.
Mm.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to look for things that aren't apparent to keep that heart full and, um, to keep you looking forward.
Mm,
Definitely. And it just sort of underscores the importance of the stories we tell and the stories we tell ourselves. And it feels like that is probably what was so important about your writing and sort of why people wanted you to write, because we can take our narratives in so many directions. And I never fault a person for where they might take their story. It's kind of like when you're um, talking to someone else and being like, does this feel supportive? Or I think we do this to ourselves in this way that's like, are you being a good friend to yourself? And I think the stories we tell
mm,
help us be a good friend to ourselves. And so writing can be a way, but even if you're not going to write a published book, just how are you telling the story to yourself of the uncertainty, the immense grief, um, you know, if we had some sort of idea of fairness and then, oh gosh, I'm having so many things happen to me. And how are we metabolizing that? And I always come back to we're naturally storytellers. I think this is why hospice will often sit with people and let them go back and tell the story of their lives, because there's something that makes us feel like, okay, that happened the way that it happened. And this is what I learned. So, do you feel like, okay, I've told my stories, or you're like, and there's another book? There is more for me to tell.
I think there is another book at Rethinking Possible, Morning Fuel, and there's this other one floating around in my mind called Losing Without Losing It.
mm,
Just kind of this permission giving that, yes, you can lose, but still be okay.
Mhm.
And found some techniques to getting through the uncertainty. And they seem to be, I call them like my paths in the wilderness. There's certain ways that I navigate that seem to work for me. And I feel, well, I could share what I've learned. And if it's helpful, great. If people can tweak it or whatever. And I really would like to try to get that one together just because even this recent hospitalization, it was the same darn paths. The gather your resources, figure out who can help, lean into doing what's next. And it's so anyway, that's what's top of mind at the moment.
I always think it's a good sign when you say the title of what you're going to write and people react. That would be
yeah.
compelling. I would want
Hmm.
that. That's such a beautiful an important offering. I was a lead facilitating a group one time, and we were talking about gathering resources, and everyone's are unique. And this one participant was offering, because she had been in the group for a while and had sort of listened to us talk about gathering resources. And she said, I write them on index cards. I have this huge pile. And when I'm in a place that I'm like spinning out or I feel like I need support, she's like, I go to those index cards. And she said, and I give myself permission to say, F that, that's not going to work. Like, just throw them until I find the one that I'm like, okay, I will do that. And I think that that's what's important about gathering resources. It's like you're naming it. what works for you. And so I know what works for me. I know what maybe 80% of the people I talk to, what works for them. But it is, again, that turning to your heart. Does this work for me? I don't know if I like that advice. I'm going to throw it out. I'm going to try something different. And staying in touch with that, which I did feel, if I just can plug your book again, was the invitation in Morning Fuel, because I loved, it's such a simple thing and it's brilliant that you keep asking, how about you?
Yeah.
So it gives people permission to be like, yeah, I got nothing.
One of my friends was in a particularly raw moment, and she just said, to heck with that gratitude stuff. I just can't, it's just not working, not working. And I appreciated that, I really did. And gratitude's huge for me, but sometimes I have to get down to, what in today is better, just one little tiny bit better, not really worth being super grateful about other than it's better, just getting minuscule.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
I
want to,
have a friend who recently started, she invited a bunch of friends to be on a thread. Just name something that tickled your heart today, or like something that sort of made you smile, because I think there's such a negativity bias in our news feeds, and there has been for decades. And it really starts to pull people down. And can you just find the thing that's, well, this was delightful to run into today. And so, like you're saying, it's not like you have to have this full on gratitude practice of, well, let me remember to say what I'm grateful for, which can start to feel like I'm a bad person if I'm not feeling grateful for anything. But if you can just say, my cat was in my face this morning and it was just sweet. And there was one thing that wasn't terrible today. You can kind of remember. And it is the thing that starts to turn our attention towards the mixed up feeling, and that in a day, both the good and the bad are happening, and that we can be in these spaces of, oh, the bad's really getting my attention, but actually both things are happening today. And so if I can at least acknowledge it, it just makes a little bit more space for, I get to be sad and I get to be happy when I'm happy, because these things are constantly changing places and priority. So I really just love that in your book. I feel like, oh, it's rare that I will find journal prompts that keep feeling fresh, and ironic that you start with the same question every time, which is, how about you? But then it's the piece after it is so unique that it feels like, oh, this is a worthwhile practice to move through
we
daily.
spent a lot of time on that second question. We tried to really
Yeah.
make it kind of a universal thread to just pull right out of whatever the piece was to see if it could resonate. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm a big journal writer, and Andrea is not. And I will do sometimes journal prompts for grief and share those on our social
And
media. And I mean, people don't really respond in the feed, but have gotten feedback from people that I've encountered in other parts of my life. That prompt yesterday was so good, and I don't know. I don't know if anyone's doing it, but I'm doing it. That's all that matters to me, and I'll share. So it delights me when there are good journal prompts to get me thinking and writing.
And helpful for those of us that don't journal, because you just look at a blank page and what's worthy of being on this blank page. And being in your book is like a conversation with you. You're telling this story or sharing something with us and then asking us to respond to it. So it feels much more conversational, a lot less sort of intimidating, as I can feel when I just look at a blank page. It has to be worthy of this page.
hey,
I've got
Yeah.
pages of unworthy content. I pity the person who has to read that someday and make a decision if it's worth saving. So I'm just curious, Becky, as we're moving into ending our time together, if there's anything that you feel you want to bring in about your books or your work, what you're up to in the world.
I think there are a couple of things more I'd like to say just about grief that are kind of some truisms for me that I hold on to. And one is, grief is as unique as your fingerprint.
Mm,
And I really embrace that fully, and to be respectful of that, to be mindful of that. And the other thing is that grief is a strange companion. And it's not true for everyone, but for me, I can get in touch with my grief pretty easily. My dad suggested I have little shelves in my mind
Mm.
where I put things that are my grief. So I have a place for my brother and my child and my other child and my divorce and my mom and my dad, and when things come that remind me of them, whether that be a smell or a taste or a set of words, I respectfully take that grief down and I might experience it again. And it might be a joyful memory. And I think the older I get, the further I get away from it, the more they're joyful memories than sad memories. But I respect its companionship, and when it visits and I don't invite it, I somehow respect it and give it the space it needs in my life at that time. I think holidays are particularly difficult when you remember the joy of 5 that's only 4, or a healthy family before and after, and or either a healthy life. You know, the anniversary of my paralysis is upcoming, and some years that one visits me hard when I realize the limits it has put on my life. But I try to experience that and then pivot into, well, what have I done with what I've have? And I think I'm trying to use what I can still use and try to share what lessons I've learned that feel like if I've lived this crazy life and there's anything I can share that can be helpful to one another, then do it. Do it with all your might. And so I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share about my books, Rethinking Possible and Morning Fuel. And I hope people will join me in my blog, which is on Thursdays. My website is beckygalli.com, BECKYGALLI.com. And you can reach out to me there as well as sign up for my emails. My books are available anywhere books are sold. So appreciate your time so much today. I've learned a lot from you guys too.
Oh, Becky, it's been such a beautiful conversation. There's so much yet to uncover, but I love that practice that your dad gave you of creating these shelves and your practice and honoring that of sort of taking these things down to experience whatever needs to be experienced and just honoring however that feels. Like the grief sometimes feels like joy and a tender, you
Mm.
know, those memories that make you laugh and cry at the same time. And sometimes they feel earth-shattering again in a way that we thought we'd never have to experience, and I think just the distance between the immediate incident and the reflection at least allow that shattering feeling to resolve or integrate more quickly than it did the first time, but it is a strange companion indeed, but I love your practice. Thank you so much.
Mm. We had get I guessed a set of like a grief deck. So this is Arena Green and Brianna Rose, sisters who created a grief deck after their mom's death, and it has journal prompts in it. And so I've been pulling cards as our closing question, and I pulled this one and I'm going to let that not be an accident, but I almost feel I know the answer. So I'll give us a moment and I'll also just invite our listeners to take a moment and think about what that answer is for them as well. When do you feel least alone in your grief? Drea, I'll start with you. When do you feel least alone in your grief?
Honestly, it's when someone asks me about it. If somebody invites a story of my dad or my grandmother, I suddenly feel like even if they didn't experience that grief, I feel it doesn't have to be just mine. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you. How about you, Becky?
When it's my grief is shared,
Mm.
same kind of thing where you
Yeah.
can invite someone into your world and their curiosity about what has happened and their interest can really bring it alive in a way that feels like it isn't a burden. They're really interested. Yeah.
Lovely.
Rebecca, how about you?
I love when I hear a thing, whether that's reading a thing, hearing someone talk, or a post on Instagram or something, but when it's like one of those real truths of grief, oh, it's not just me. I'm not alone in this. And it can put a name to things that I'm feeling. And kind of what popped into my head is the first one that I heard that was so resonant was after my dad died. I have these series of grief events, and but they were all really sudden. It was like my dad's death, my diagnosis of cancer, and my sister's first child was stillborn. My brother and sister and I read Joan Didion's book, The Year of Magical Thinking. And when she's describing her husband just dying at the dinner table, she says it happens in an instant, an ordinary instant. One minute you're sitting down to dinner, and the next moment, life as you know it has changed. And is when things like that land, and I'm like, thank you. I feel like there's a universal experience that can kind of be named. And now I know I'm not alone in my shock or in my whatever. So, yeah. And I feel like you said a lot of things today, Becky, that were like that. So that helps me not feel alone in my grief. And I appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you, Becky, for sharing your grief. I feel like we literally skimmed the top of it, and we will share all of your books and ways to be in contact with you so that others can dive more deeply into what you have chosen to share. And to our listeners, may they find that mirror that reflects back to them that they aren't alone in however they're experiencing their grief.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome, Becky. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening to this episode of All the Grief. You can find us on Instagram at All the Grief Pod. And please take a moment to rate our podcast and share us with your friends. We'd love to keep expanding our reach to all the people